a superhero. Explode is one of the most popular characters in pop culture and has been for some time. Even before the big explosion of superhero movies in the mainstream, odds were if someone was going to name a superhero, it was going to be Batman, Superman, or Spider-Man. And because of this, in the past 20 years, we have gotten 9 Spider-Man movies, with the 10th coming out this year. The character has defined so much of the perception of superheroes because he is the one that most people can directly relate to. He isn't a billionaire, except for that one time when he was. He doesn't have powers that make him more powerful than God, except for that one time that he did. He's just a regular guy. One of the other huge things pushing Spider-Man to the forefront of the popularity contest of superheroes is that his entire body is covered by his suit. You can see Superman's face, you can see Batman's jawline, you can tell kind of who they are. But with Spider-Man, anyone can wear the mask. It doesn't matter who you are or what you look like. You too.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44, a complete AI creation platform.
Could be Spider-Man. So when adapting this character and bringing in the larger idea of the Spider-Verse, what choices have to be made to keep all of this relatability there? You're taking a concept that is a little out there, but still grounded in the problems of day-to-day life, and throwing it into the full-blown reality of science fiction. That science fiction will then amplify those problems. Now, we love to talk about character and the impact the characters have on their respective stories on the channel, because that's what makes us care. That's what makes the audience care for a story. So when looking at the 2 Spider-Man movies that have already come out that involve the Spider-Verse, what are the strengths of the one that highlight why the other isn't as effective in dealing with the multiverse and all of these problems? How does that one film make us care for the character of Spider-Man in all of their forms? How does it make us feel the weight of being a kid from Queens or Brooklyn or wherever just in over their head? How does Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse succeed at the whole multiverse storytelling thing where Spider-Man No Way Home failed? And if you want to create something this great, you need to stay sharp, and there's no better way to do that than with this video's sponsor, Brilliant. The way you learn with Brilliant is super intuitive and easy. Their lesson layout and way of engaging with you is super effective and makes learning new things on a daily basis so easy. And this kind of learning has been proven to be 6 times more efficient than the traditional and boring lectures people sit through. Everything you learn in Brilliant, you learn by doing. Creating drag and drop coding, forming charts and graphs, and so much more. The way they present everything makes even the most abstract ideas easy to understand and relate to. So at the end of the day, you'll actually understand what you're learning, which isn't that the whole point of learning? You want to be able to practice it. So to try everything Brilliant has to offer free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/filmspeak or click on the link in the description. The first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. Again, that's brilliant.org/filmspeak for a free 30-day trial, and thank you so much to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. Off the bat, I think something needs to be addressed about the core identities of these 2 films. Spider-Verse was constructed from the ground up as a movie featuring the multiverse. At its core, it was always going to be a story about Miles Morales and figuring out how to be yourself, but for this movie, that journey was always going to involve different spider people coming into the world and helping Miles. It wasn't just a gimmick they threw in there in order to have cool cameos and all of that. No, it was actually an integral part of that story. They used it as a tool. The case of No Way Home is actually a bit different. It's interesting because initially, it didn't even start out as a Spider-Verse movie. There were so many rumors circulating that the plot was involving Kraven the Hunter and the Chameleon teaming up to take down the Webbed Wonder, but soon, the idea of bringing in Dr. Octopus was put on the table. The thing is, you're not going to top Alfred Molina in that role, so they basically were just like, all right, let's just get Alfred Molina. And they started started talking about how they could bring that character into this story, and instead of just saying he looks the same in this universe, they went with this needlessly overcomplicated idea of Spider-Verse. In the alternate reality where they didn't follow this idea, and we did get a one universe centered Spider-Man movie with Kraven, and down the line it came out that there was the potential to see all the past live action Spider-Men on the screen. Let's be real, everyone would be a little upset.
He stinks and I don't like it.
It's just one of those ideas that's too good to be true, and like something that everyone would have wanted to see. But outside of that initial wow factor, it doesn't feel as though it's furthering this story. If they really wanted to go with the idea of bringing in all the past Spider-Men, then maybe they should have figured out a way to make it work and that actually serviced all of the characters. Because you know what's better than those actors reprising their roles as the characters? Giving those characters something to do, taking them to the next level, showing that they have growth left inside of them. But let's focus in on Peter and Miles respectively. Interestingly, both of these stories are about finding yourself. For Miles, he feels as though he has to live up to the idea of Peter Parker's Spider-Man, the one who died in his universe. And for MCU Peter, he has to come into his own as a hero, which, for a trilogy capper, is a bit strange to get your main character to where they're supposed to be from the first one, but that's one of the odd things about the MCU. This interpretation of the character fits well into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but feels a bit odd in the larger landscape of Spider-Man movies. I'll give him credit for doing something different, but to drag out your character's origin over the course of 3 films just seems like a weird idea. When we meet Peter in Civil War, he's seemingly already Spider-Man. He already understands the whole great power, great responsibility thing. We just haven't seen it. And I guess the films don't want to mention Uncle Ben either. But anyways, we have a Spider-Man that already exists and that is given cool tech from Tony Stark, and that's how he gets the better costume and all that. He's already gone through the origin, and so throughout the course of his trilogy, he is going in circles, learning things that you think he would know if he's already Spider-Man, and it's just a bit messy and all over the place. With Miles, it's pretty clear cut. It's a coming-of-age film, and he has to learn that anyone can be Spider-Man, that he is worthy to wear the mask. He can be this symbol of hope not only for Brooklyn, but for the entirety of New York City. Now, that doesn't mean that he stops growing, obviously, but the origin, the with great power comes great responsibility thing, is already established. He learns what he needs to do. He's gone through the inciting incident. We're not dragging it out. And I know people kind of like the fact that the Tom Holland Spider-Man trilogy is...
Remember your coffee talk era? Your Fitfluencer era? Or your it's not just a toy era? Well, with Vintage...
this 3-part origin story, and that's fine. If you like it, cool. I just think it feels like they retroactively decided to make it an origin trilogy rather than actually organically making it an origin trilogy. Now, each Raimi film, Spider-Verse, and even the Webb films feel quintessentially New York. There have been many stories that take Spidey out of New York City, but there is something to be said about giving the city that much character. People don't really know how to feel about the Webhead with the constant bad press he gets, juxtaposed with people seeing him help and save everyone all the time. It informs a lot of the choices these characters make, and allowing us to exist in a world that feels alive is always exciting. In Spider-Verse, Brooklyn feels alive. It actually feels like the borough that it's depicting. It feels like a place we need to save because we know the people there. Miles' parents, the kids at school, the city that is mourning the loss of Spider-Man. Every corner of it is filled with graffiti, or you're seeing gentrification happen, really allowing you to feel like you know every block of the city. In the MCU, New York has never really felt like anything outside of the first Avengers movie, but that's definitely a very broad look at the city. In Homecoming, we were able to explore a bit more of the suburbs of Queens, which outside of Aunt May's house has been mostly left out, and then the second movie takes us out of the city, and the third has way too much going on, so you don't really get too much of the New York experience. That experience, however, is so integral to the feeling of these movies. There is an authenticity that comes about by the way these movies traditionally depict New York. Spider-Man is synonymous with the Big Apple. If you can't get New York right, then the character doesn't feel complete. It's an earnestness that is found in the Raimi trilogy and again found in Spider-Verse. The amount these characters care for each other is palpable. Every emotion is carried with weight because of the style of storytelling on display. We've seen emotion come through in the MCU, but I can't say that it's at its strongest with this version of Spider-Man. This is a great point to talk about the stylistic differences in these films. Now, obviously, I know what you're saying. Oh, hey, I mean, one's animated and the other's live action. Obviously, they're gonna look and feel different. Yeah, I know, but I still think it's worth looking at the way that these two go about presenting the story. Now, obviously, it's a bit unfair because Spider-Verse is a movie that pushed the medium of animation forward. It was groundbreaking and had rippling effects in the industry, allowing 3D animated films to embrace more traditional 2D animated techniques alongside an explosion of style and character that had been lost in the post-Pixar renaissance. That's not a knock on Pixar, it just kind of set the standard and a lot of other studios followed. And we're comparing this monumental achievement in filmmaking to a film that has to fit into a larger house style that overall is not that flashy and often doesn't make very bold choices in its way of conveying visuals. Now, taking all of that into account, it's pretty clear that one film is actually interested in utilizing the multiverse in an interesting way. As the weird cosmic creative oasis it is, Spider-Verse delves headfirst into the rich opportunities something like the multiverse provides. We aren't just seeing fan-favorite versions of characters converging onto one place. No, we see fractures in the fabric of the universe. Someone like Spider-Man Noir always has his cape billowing in the wind and brings along a general confusion to the idea of color. Spider-Ham is able to pull hammers and anvils out of his pockets, float through the air when he smells pie. He exists within his own realm of physics. We even get Spider-Gwen, who isn't just another version of Peter Parker, but similar to Miles, a completely new character with an interesting new origin, but is quintessentially Spider-Man. Spider-Verse uses the multiverse to explore the canvas of Spider-Man and the meaning behind the mask. The weirder and more non-traditional the Spider-Man, the greater the impact when it comes to making the case that anyone can be Spider-Man. Spider-Verse is trying to progress the character in the franchise beyond Peter Parker. No Way Home, on the other hand, is far more regressive. It's insistent on not only upholding the Peter Parker status quo, but it's almost banking on your nostalgic love for far superior iterations of the character to drive your emotional 3D animated films to embrace more traditional 2D animated techniques alongside an explosion of style and character that had been lost in the post-Pixar renaissance. That's not a knock on Pixar, it just kind of set the standard and a lot of other studios followed. And we're comparing this monumental achievement in filmmaking to a film that has to fit into a larger house style that overall is not that flashy and often doesn't make very bold choices in its way of conveying visuals. Now, taking all of that into account, it's pretty clear that one film is actually interested in utilizing the multiverse in an interesting way. As the weird cosmic creative oasis it is, Spider-Verse delves headfirst into the rich opportunities something like the multiverse provides. We aren't just seeing fan-favorite versions of characters converging onto one place. No, we see fractures in the fabric of the universe. Someone like Spider-Man Noir always has his cape billowing in the wind and brings along a general confusion to the idea of color. Spider-Ham is able to pull hammers and anvils out of his pockets, float through the air when he smells pie. He exists within his own realm of physics. We even get Spider-Gwen, who isn't just another version of Peter Parker, but similar to Miles, a completely new character with an interesting new origin, but is quintessentially Spider-Man. Spider-Verse uses the multiverse to explore the canvas of Spider-Man and the meaning behind the mask. The weirder and more non-traditional the Spider-Man, the greater the impact when it comes to making the case that anyone can be Spider-Man. Spider-Verse is trying to progress the character in the franchise beyond Peter Parker. No Way Home, on the other hand, is far more regressive. It's insistent on not only upholding the Peter Parker status quo, but it's almost banking banking on your nostalgic love for far superior iterations of the character to drive your emotional connection to the current narrative. That's also echoed in the visuals and the overall handling of the multiverse. We don't even get to see any different or interesting worlds, not even a tease. In No Way Home, the vast, endless potential of the multiverse is diminished to sitcom-like guest appearances in this incredibly stale and indistinct version of Spider-Man and New York City. The multiverse is simply a gimmick to get Willem Dafoe, Alfred Molina, Tobey Maguire, and Andrew Garfield back. And yeah, those actors are making a whole damn meal of the crumbs they're given, which makes for a much more enjoyable experience. But if those characters just showed up without a multiversal explanation, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Yeah, you could argue the same happens in Spider-Verse as well, with all the spider people converging to Miles' reality, but at least the concept is interpreted with style. This is illustrated perfectly by how they show the characters entering into the universe, or at least appearing for the first time in the film. In Spider-Verse, it's insanely kinetic. You see these characters ripped from their reality and flung into a system moving faster than you can even fathom until they are spit out at top speed into Miles' universe. It's engaging, it's crazy, it's a visual marvel to see. Then, in No Way Home, you just kind of see people.
Zara's hitting peak night in. Because Sano, Mad Egg, Hooker, and more are now on Just Eat.
Walking through a Doctor Strange portal into a living room. I'm not all about fanfare when it comes to character entrances. I don't want the whole hold for applause sort of thing, which they still managed to do in this film, but at least if you're gonna have this multiversal entrance, make it explosive, make it impactful, feel like someone is going from another universe into the one we're currently at. And the other frustrating thing about No Way Home is the sheer amount of unnecessary characters at play here. Like, yeah, Spider-Verse has a lot of characters, but they all serve a purpose. At no point does it ever feel overcrowded. No Way Home was clearly burdened by Sony's decade-long attempt to assemble the Sinister Six on screen. And the funny part is they don't even have 6 villains here, so really, what was the point of it all? And that's cool. They were finally able to kinda do it, but what does the Lizard add? What does Sandman? I don't even know what the hell Flint's angle is for 90% of the movie. He seems diametrically opposed to the goals of the collective villain group, and yet he's there fighting the Spider-Men because there are clear arcs for Ock, Goblin, and Electro. That's all you needed. And what's great about that is that you could have just paired each of them with a Spider-Man to go up against. They each get a villain that challenges where they're at as characters, and they both go through arcs together. Tobey with Ock, Andrew with Electro, and Tom with Green Goblin. It would have made one of the best parts of No Way Home, when the villains and heroes finally get to have a brief exchange together, even more impactful. It's honestly a testament to the talent of the actors playing these characters that moment is so effective. And Willem Dafoe is, again, fantastic in the role, and I would say that Green Goblin in No Way Home is a more engaging villain than the Kingpin in Spider-Verse. Is this because of how much footwork is done by the Raimi movies, allowing Willem Dafoe to just go for it and give an incredibly menacing and fun performance? I mean, I don't know, but yeah, that's the reason. That's exactly why it is. Within these villains, though, we get a great way of looking into how both of these films talk about the multiverse. Spider-Verse, of course, gives us the incredible framing device of, alright, let's do this one more time, which very concisely and easily allows us to understand how the multiverse works, how these characters got to this universe, and that within the multiverse, things can be very different. The filmmakers also, again, are able to lean into the weirdness of those multiverses and allow them to become strengths in the story. No Way Home doesn't have these enormous character-defining things to show off. Each universe we're pulling from has relatively speaking, the same physics and overall a version of New York that arguably looks similar. The biggest difference is probably that Tobey's New York has a train from Chicago running through Harlem. Then, of course, there's the way these characters interact with the story. In Spider-Verse, Peter B. Parker is introduced very early on. He is helping guide Miles basically through the entire story. He isn't acting as a parental figure to him because he's a mess. This Peter has gone through his life and had, as it's been coined, the truest case of Parker luck. He lost the love of his life. He panics when the idea of becoming a father is brought up. He makes dicey spider-themed business investments that don't pan out. He's a Peter so beaten down by life that it all starts to scare him. Sure, he's Spider-Man, and that means you have this confidence to help others, but it often means you lose sight of helping yourself, of taking the risk to be the best version of you can be. He hasn't figured out the balance of Peter Parker and Spider-Man quite yet. And the Peter Parker side of his life has really taken a downward spiral and in turn has affected his life as Spider-Man. This is where Miles comes in. Miles helps Peter. He's able to show him how to be the best version of himself, how to be a person who can be happy and be Spider-Man. He reflects his teachings back on him. The teachings that make him Spider-Man and telling him to apply it to being Peter, into letting things be a leap of faith. They are helping each other because both of these characters have an arc to go on in this film. Peter B. Parker has to come to terms with the mistakes he made that left him alone, his fear and insecurities. He finds help in Miles. Both characters learn from one another, which you can't necessarily say in No Way Home. The three Peters in No Way Home don't really get to operate in a similar way, even though you'd think they would want to do that. Sure, they have a very fun sibling-esque dynamic, but it's not much below knee-deep. The problem is the filmmakers were entirely too precious with these characters to the point of being afraid to really do much with them. By the time we link up with them, they're at points in their lives where they've already gone through their shit off screen and we're just told about it. But I think it would have been much more interesting to see them go through it and overcome stuff on screen. If you're going to pluck the villains out of their timelines at the moment they're almost killed, why not pluck the Spider-Men out of their universe shortly after we last saw them in Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2? What if Andrew, this dark, bitter, rageful Spider-Man who's neglected the Peter Parker side of himself and become the Mask, was presented with a reflection of his anger post Gwen's death in Tom's Peter because of the example he set? I think he'd have to come to terms with the darkness inside of him and what he's become, and what better way to do so than in seeing yourself objectively in someone else. It's not what Gwen would have wanted. Tobey's obviously the most put together version of himself, but even the last time we saw him, he was grappling with his relationship with MJ. He did some serious, irreparable damage to that. Maybe seeing Tom's Peter with his MJ can restore his faith or something along those lines. I don't know. I think it's okay to lean on Tobey as being the most evolved with lessons he can impart down onto the other two, but do something to show growth for the character. And then with Tom being the youngest of the three, needing the guidance, perhaps getting some wrong lessons along with the good from how Tobey and Andrew handled things. You know, like actual siblings. Also, to bring Spider-Verse into this, I think you clearly see how Peter B. Parker's mentality has affected Miles after the death of his uncle, and so that Peter is being forced to confront that side of himself, what he's become, and then tries to remedy that despite how he's feeling. And so there's a direct point of contrast to everything I was just talking about, to these older Peters seeing their mistakes reflected in a younger person. Jon Watts was gifted this incredible opportunity to play with characters that have had the groundwork laid for them. The hard job is done, and he could just pick up their arcs and run with the wealth of material there. Instead, he does the safest, least interesting thing you could with those characters. They're just a sounding board for Tom, essentially, and that's fine. The film makes it work, but I just so desperately would have loved to have seen the film treat these icons as characters and not sacred relics or action figures that you don't want to touch or move in a different way, especially because he clearly had an angle for each of the Peters. But it's just a bit weird to do nothing new with these these characters, and it's also odd to say that their adventures seem to have stopped after their respective film series. There's a scene in No Way Home where the Peters are comparing rogues galleries, and it's just all of the villains they've faced in their films, all the people that we've literally just seen for like the past hour of the movie. It's a weird thing to do. I don't know if it's because Peter B. Parker and all the other Spider people in Spider-Verse faced so many villains off camera, if it's because I played all the movie tie-in games so I know for a fact that Toby fought the Scorpion, Rhino, Mysterio, Vulture, and others.
The shocker of the shocker. I shock people.
It just feels wrong to say that they haven't done anything else. They obviously have grown from the last time we saw them, but how did that happen? What villains pushed them to become this version of Spider-Man that we're getting to catch up with in this movie? There were so many interesting things they could have done there. Maybe Andrew's character could have talked about his Mary Jane Watson, like just missed opportunities, very surface level conversations, nothing that really had any inkling of imagination. And it all feels boring and antiquated when we're getting the ideal versions of these characters in Spider-Verse. As a quick tangent, let's talk about modern comics. For the past 10 years, Peter Parker has been stuck, for lack of a better term. There was an event called One More Day, which basically gets adapted into the story for No Way Home, that made everyone forget Peter was Spider-Man because it was public knowledge at the time, but in turn made his marriage to Mary Jane never exist. Now, since then, there have been good Spidey stories focusing on Peter. Superior Spider-Man, Spider Island, Big Time, the beginning of stuff with Kindred when Ryan Ottley was on the book, all great stuff. But the fans wanted to be able to see Peter outgrow these 20-year-old problems of being single and not being able to pay rents and become a husband, a father, someone who has to deal with family troubles while still not being able to pay rent.
Where's my money?
Spider-Verse gave us that. And Across the Spider-Verse is making it even better by giving him his daughter. This is what the fans have been clamoring for. And from all of this, the adolescent problems can be given to Miles, who is still a teenager. Miles excels in facing these real-life issues the same way Peter did in the classic Lee Romita books from the late 60s. It's not all about giving the fans what they want to see. Often, that can just feel devoid of the emotional weight it needed. But the weirdest part about it is that Spider-Verse works as Miles' origin story. The thing is, Miles and MCU Peter are just at entirely different points in their journey into becoming Spider-Man. In fact, only one of them is truly earning their title. The other already has it and is just now figuring out his way in the world. Miles is able to see through the multiverse the many paths being Spider-Man can take. You get to see the mistakes of people who were at one point in Miles' shoes. They aren't just tacked onto the story and tell us the struggles they went through. They're directly pointing to where Miles can go from where he currently is. They're showing him what it means to be Spider-Man. As to with the three Peters in No Way Home, they really aren't helping Tom realize anything. They're just kind of there to help him get over the death of his aunt, which is nice. It's sweet. I mean, they all have gone through tragedy, and I like them being able to bond over that. The choice he makes at the end of the day for everyone to forget who he is doesn't really come from the tutelage of any other Peter. It's his choice, which is good. He's taking responsibility for his actions, but it doesn't really connect to anything the Peters or even May was really trying to tell him throughout the course of the film. And that just ends up giving you a movie where the inclusion of these Spider-Men feels uneven. Spider-Man isn't just one thing. It isn't just a vehicle for nostalgia. He has to stand for a lot. And there is a very distinct difference when you can feel the passion and art placed behind those choices as opposed to what a boardroom's ideal of what Spider-Man should be is thrown onto the screen. Spider-Verse is packed with clear and honest passion for the character. No Way Home feels as though they just needed to set up more movies. It perpetuates the MCU machine, and in it there are some really great shining moments, but in the end it created a sort of disjointed movie, which gives us all the more reason to be excited about Across the Spider-Verse and Beyond the Spider-Verse after that, and seeing how these truly passionate artists will infuse the story of Miles into another crazy tale of spider mayhem.